I'm just going to show you guys over here. Alright, well I'm Steven with Lofton, and this is one of our Kohler generators that you guys have purchased. And if you look on this silver tag right here, there's going to be your model number and all of your important information as far as how this relates to Kohler. So right here on this silver tag. So right here it tells you that this is a model 180 RAZX. It'll tell you that the kW rating is 180 kW. So you know what this generator will put out if it was putting out 100%. Tells you what your battery voltage is, your RPM, fuel type, serial number, manufacturer date, all that important information is going to be right here on this tag. So whenever you guys need to reference anything through Kohler or through Lofton, parts or whatever, any kind of support, you're going to get these numbers right here. Okay, so that's the most important numbers that you need to have. What I'm going to do is I want to walk you through basically what I would look at on a daily basis, just the things that I would be looking for, pre-startup checkup, pre-startup checks, weekly checks, monthly checks, those kind of things. I know that you guys have sheets that you fill out as far as what the generators look like, what the state of readiness is, and if there's any deficiencies, and I'm going to show you how to find some of the more common things. I won't go completely into depth, but I'll go through all the things that we look at on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we're running efficiently. So obviously you have your gas line coming in here, and then you have your solenoids and your regulators to go into the manifold, which actually feeds your gas system on this natural gas generator. Obviously we have spark plugs on this particular unit, or ignition coils, and that's what's going to help turn this engine over as opposed to diesel. So right here we have our oil filter, which is going to be right here. You're only going to have one filter on this one. We have the oil filter here. You just want to make sure that there's no leaking or anything coming out from underneath it. Any kind of dampness under the generator is okay. Puddling is not okay. So if it's a little bit damp, I would kind of pay attention to it. If it's a puddle, I'd pay a lot of attention to it, just to make sure that that there's no repetitive or there's no excessive fluids coming out of the unit. And if so, try to identify what it is. Try to identify where it's coming from. I'll kind of point out a few things as we go along. So obviously up here in your manifold, and this is where all of the magic happens, is where all the fuel comes into the generator. On this side here, where this yellow tag is just above here, is our turbo. What happens with the generator is that within 8 seconds it's supposed to pick up the load. So for it to pick up the load in 8 seconds, it needs to be at full RPMs instantaneously, which is why we have the turbo. So the turbo will engage instantaneously. This generator should hit RPMs less than 8 seconds, and within 8 seconds of the generator actually starting, the ATS should transfer and you should get a full load carried on the generator that quickly. So that being said, the reason why I say that, and I bring it up the way I do, is because it's that important that this generator starts the first time, every time, so that the generator can pick up and the ATS can find the power within 8 seconds. So we have life safety, fire pumps, all these other things that are running on this generator. So when I look at a generator, I come around and I try to look for immediate, obvious things. So obviously, anywhere where there's a rubber hose, I try to come over and I'll grab onto that rubber hose and I'll make sure that there's some flexibility in it. I'll make sure that there's no cracking and it's not damp around those top connections and that these hose clamps are somewhat tight. Try to make sure that anything that I can see as far as an electrical connection looks good and that they're not crunchy and they're not getting all melted together. So you don't have to pull them all out, but I usually just come out and I'll just wiggle on things like this and I'll just try to make sure that everything looks like it's where it's supposed to be, it's not leaking, it's not falling off. Obviously you guys are inside of a room here, so you shouldn't have too much rodent problems like some other people would have when their units are outside. So as far as keeping everything clean and not so dusty, you should be in fairly good shape. You have a lot of cages around this end of the generator here, but you do have some of your more vital components over here, which are your drive belts. So you definitely want to keep a look at the edge of those drive belts so that they're not fraying, they're not dry rotting, and that you actually still have some grips at the bottom of them. There's no obstructions within the fan's not chipping, falling apart. Everything looks to be stable. Because obviously a lot of the problems that a lot of people have with their generator is on this side. Belts can snap for no reason or any reason. It could be for anything at all. It could just be heat, it could just be its time, it could be bad rubber, it could be anything. So what we like to tell everybody is anything that's rubber on this generator, manufacturer's recommendation is to replace it at least every 3 years. Whether you need it or not, you should replace it. That includes your silicone block heater hoses, which carry the hot coolant, your regular hoses or any of these couplers that hold the hard pipes together, your fuel lines, those kind of things, your blowback hoses. All of those things should be looked at least every 3 years and hopefully replaced if it warrants that. You have your reservoir up here for your coolant and everything, and you actually have a sight bubble that's actually built in here, so you'll be able to see that you actually have coolant in there. You do have a low-level coolant sensor, which is located right here. And the good thing about having your bubble here and the coolant sensor where it is that if you ever get a low coolant alarm that pops up anywhere, you'll be able to know right away if it's a bad sensor or not, because you'll be able to see the coolant in there. And the good thing is also I can see right now that it's a green, and that's good to know, because if you have green coolant versus red coolant, you don't ever want to mix the green and red together because they get rancid. So it's either all green or all red, and that's how it works, and it's a 50-50 mix.